Hello everyone, welcome or welcome back. I'm the Tilted Crown Gourmet. I'm super excited to be presenting to you my version of New England Clam Chowder. Now this is wonderful any time of year, however it's especially delicious during those winter months. In my clam chowder, of course, you've got tender clams, smoky bacon, potatoes, but I do not utilize cream. I actually blend some of my soup in order to give you that creamy richness without those extra calories. I've paired this with my homemade sourdough bread, and you'll be getting glimpses of that video during this video. So if you're ready, let's roll up those sleeves, let's get some prep done, and let's get cooking. We're gonna get some prep done for our New England style clam chowder. We're gonna start by peeling our potatoes. So now that our potatoes are peeled, go ahead and get them and cut them into medium-sized cubes. We don't want to go too small with our potatoes, and the reason we don't is because if we go too small, you're going to end up with overcooked potatoes and they'll kind of turn to mush. So we want them to be medium. Now the other veggies that I dice, I will be doing small, but with our potatoes, we want them to be kind of medium size. So go ahead and dice up our celery. I go up the stalk. Remember, I want these to be relatively small when I dice them. Have our fennel. This is a very small bulb of fennel. I'm going to use the entire thing. Now understand, fennel is not a standard addition to clam chowder. However, I enjoy the flavor of fennel, that kind of anisey flavor, so I think it's a nice addition to the clam chowder. However, traditionally it is not a traditional addition. Now all of these veggies are going to go into the same bowl, and the reason for that is they're actually going to all be introduced at the same time into our soup. With the carrots, you'll note there's some recipes that do not have carrots, others do have carrots. I like the carrots because they add yet another layer of texture. Also, it adds some color to our dish. Remember, you taste with your eyes long before you taste with your mouth. So something else that sometimes I put in my New England style, not Manhattan style, clam chowder are actually tomatoes. And what I do is I take the skin off and all the seeds out, and then just chop up the meat of the tomato and put it into my chowder. So that's another variant of my clam chowder that I have. I want to dice up our onions. And because of the size of this onion, I'm only going to use one. And what I've done is, before I started prepping all of this stuff, because it doesn't take very long, I put my bacon in the freezer so it could firm up, so cutting it should be easier. And with my garlic, I just get it and roughly chop it. Well, I do a little bit more than roughly chop it because I want it a little bit chunky, but not like huge chunks. So, you know, this step, some people put it through the garlic press. I just think that's too fine, but that's, again, personal preference. I was asked what my favorite canned clams. They're these. I actually really like Snow's minced clams. They have a wonderful flavor. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be draining off the juice, and then I'll be adding two more bottles of clam juice to augment that. So we're going to drain those clams and we're going to set them aside. Now that everything is prepped, I put some olive oil into my pan, and we're going to put it on medium-high heat. Then we're going to add in our bacon. Now, the reason I've added olive oil to my pan before adding my bacon is I don't want to have overly browned bacon. So if I were to add the bacon into the pot without the olive oil, I have a higher chance of ending up with bacon that's more brown than I want it to be. I want this to be, dish is very briny and kind of seafoody, and I don't want the overly browned bacon to pull away from the clam chowder. So we're going to cook this for about 6 minutes. So this is 6 minutes later, and I believe that the bacon's rendered most of its fat out. So we're going to be adding in our butter, along with all of our aromatics. Now, we do not want these to brown. We want them to soften. Salt. We want to make sure that we kind of keep our veggies moving. Again, we do not want these to brown. We want them to soften. So when they're going to release their water, and then once most of the liquid has evaporated, the water that they release has evaporated, then we'll move on to our next step. So I see that most of my liquid has cooked out of my veggies. So I'm going to add our white wine to deglaze our pan. So just in case there are any bits in there, use the white wine to get them up. And now we're going to cook this until most of that wine also evaporates. So most of my wine has evaporated. So now we're going to add in the reserve juice, clam juice from the cans, as well as the two additional bottles of clam juice. And then we're going to be adding in our milk, followed by our bay leaves, a little bit of salt, and a cornstarch slurry. Now the reason we're adding this in is we don't want our milk to split. We don't want broken milk. So what happens is milk can break, and when it breaks, it becomes very grainy. So we don't want that. And if you add the cornstarch in before the milk comes close to a boil, it helps to prevent that from happening. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get this and bring it up to a simmer. I don't want it too hot. I just want to bring it up to a simmer. As our soup comes up to its simmer, I want to go ahead and add in our potatoes. Once this is at a simmer, we're going to cover it and we're going to let it cook for about 10 minutes. Because what we want is we want our potatoes to be cooked, but we do not want them to be mushy. So they will not be smashable, but we want them to be cooked through. Starting to come up to a simmer, so we are going to cover this up, lower the temperature, and come back in 10 minutes. And while our soup is simmering, I want to go ahead and get our thyme and dill chopped up. Now, I just put mine together because I put it in right at the end. These are very tender vegetables, so you put them in right at the end after it comes off of the heat. That way they maintain their intensity of flavor and the brightness that we want from our dill and our thyme. So our 10 minutes has elapsed. It's time to check our potatoes to see if they're tender. So we want firm, not crunchy. And if they're firm but not crunchy, then we can move on to our next step. Those are perfect. Now I want to ladle about a quart of my soup into my blender. Now the reason we don't want the bay leaf in there. The reason I do this is so I don't have to add cream. You'll get the mouthfeel of cream without the added calories and also the added richness that comes with the cream. Because when you end up having the extra richness, it actually can make the take away from the brininess of the soup. So we want to take about a quart and put it on our. So if you notice, I've removed the center cap. I've removed the center cap out of my blender. I will cover it with a towel because I don't want it to explode. It's hot liquid. Okay, so now we are going to check this and see if it's nice and creamy. Look at that. That is nice and creamy. So we are going to take the lid off of our clam chowder and we're going to add this back in. Give everything a stir. I'm actually going to switch from my ladle. So I want to get everything a good stir. Now we're going to add in our sherry. Now, if you don't want to use sherry, don't use it. For me, it adds a depth of flavor and a bit of a sweetness to the clam chowder. Add in our clam meat, and the heat of the soup is going to warm this up pretty much instantly because these are chopped. And add in your dill and your thyme. And the last thing we want to do is make sure we have enough salt. Just a little bit more. Now that's perfect. I have warmed up my shallow bowls in the oven. I believe that this will go amazingly well with my sourdough bread that I made earlier today. And there will be a link in the description so you can get that video if you want to make some sourdough bread. Now that it's done, it's time to give everything a taste. Quite lovely. Thank you again for joining me, the Tilted Crown Gourmet, on another episode. I hope you try this clam chowder And don't forget, look in the description, there will be a link to my sourdough video. Thank you.
Remember, your kitchen is your passport to the world, allowing you to explore diverse cultures and cuisines right from home as you explore new flavors and techniques. And as always, bon appetit.